USA, USA, USA. Hi, it's me, the Yellow Sheldon. I have a big pile of weird derailers here. Let's talk about each and every one of them. On top, it's not that weird. This is a this is just a SRAM 9.0. However, for a time, SRAM was making different skins, so it's sort of a collect them all sort of deal. This is the American flag one. They had a Woody, which was wood grain, your shifters and goddamn whatever, probably brake levers, although I don't remember any brake levers. All of their nice plasticky derailleurs were done up in American flag or wood grain or I'm sure swastika livery. So, you know, that's pretty cool for a plain old derailleur. I mean, who doesn't love beautiful American jingoism manifest as a derailleur? Moving right along, if you thought plastic derailleurs were anything new, you'd be mistaken. This is an off-mega. This little banana boy here was an early attempt at a lightweight plastic derailleur. What's funny about these is I've never ever seen one broken. So apparently the grade of plastic they were using, I'm not sure if they were using a fiberglass reinforced nylon or if they're just using some sort of plain plastic or shit. They might have been using Bakelite for all I know. But it works. It shifts. And they made a bunch of cool colors. You could get sort of like a baby pink, like a little girl baby pink. You could get a blue one. You can get a black one. They had all these dope colors. And yeah, early plastic derailleur. Brevetto of Mega Mistral. I have always loved these. So, you know, there's a great book on early shift mechanisms, basically on the derailleur, called The Dancing Bear. No, it was called The Dancing Chain. And it's a wonderful book about the development of the ability to shift gears on a bicycle. Now, the very earliest ones were really cool. So you had a couple levers. You had a lever sort of on your seat tube, and you had another lever a little bit further back. And one of the levers opened up your quick release. The other lever had like a metal spoon at the end, and it would just shove your chain over one direction or the other. So, you know, they might have had 2 in the front, 3 in the back. They might have had 1 in the front and 3 or 4 in the back. And the idea was that you would, you know, you'd be able to sort of... Oh, I should mention this. The dropouts of those bikes had little teeth. They had detents, preset spots where your bike wheel could sit in the frame. So, you know, you could... And they were like basically like a single speed. There wasn't really a mechanical derailleur like this taking up the chain slack. So you could open your quick release, sort of shimmy your ass up in the air. Your wheel would go to the next spot back or the next spot forward or whatever. I'm told, or rather I'm not told this, all those fucking guys are dead, but I have read that people got very good at doing this on the bike while riding, even though that was not necessarily the intention. So open your quick release, shimmy, and then... I'm getting a text from a girl? Inconceivable. That is actually quite sweet of her. Oh yeah, fuckers, it's my birthday. I'm an old man. I'm a 37-year-old. Luckily, I have the Asian genes, so, you know, aside from the craggy face and the broken hands, it doesn't really look like I'm that old. So, back to this early derailleur system. You'd shift using one lever, and it would just knock the chain over onto the next cog. You would open your quick release with the other lever, and then tension your essentially single-speed drivetrain by letting it sink back into that the detent that was meant for it in the wheel, and then closing the quick release again. It doesn't sound very quick, does it? Well, what came after that was kind of cool. You'll notice that this is a derailleur that is not based on a parallelogram. And I think these are such a genius way of moving a chain from left to right or right to left across a freewheel. So this is a coil spring. It's just a frickin' coil spring. And this is just a chain puller. So you can imagine that this is mounted to the frame. Your shifter is tied to this damn thing, and when you pull the shift lever, and it's a stiff spring, so it's like impossible for me to do it on camera, but you'd pull the spring, and it would move. It would move the derailleur into a harder gear. Super cool. It really looks homemade, sort of Mad Maxy, but you know, these were derailleurs. If you wanted derailleurs, at a certain point, you could get this. One of the finest parallelogram derailleurs I think I've ever seen is the Hooray Jubilee, or as my old boss used to call it, the Hooray Jew Belly. Now, one, this is frickin' jewelry. Look at all the melted angles. All the edges are sort of melted on this, and what that means is that they're sort of softened. I'm dropping parts off of it. It almost looks like what, like a bass clef musical symbol. I actually don't know shit about that, so maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like some sort of sheet music symbol to me. These were so light. There's so little material here. Look in this plane. In this plane, you can see how flattened and thinned out all of the components are on this. These were so light that, in fact, up through the 90s and the early 2000s, some of the lightest bikes in the world, and I don't mean like, oh, I bought a nice light bike from the local bike shop. I mean like, there's a group, a subculture of people called weight weenies in cycling, and probably in every other sport, who modify, spend thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to make their bike the lightest possible bike. We're talking getting down to 6, 7, 8 pounds for a complete bike. Well, several of them had the Hooray Jubilee, and they would do all kinds of crazy stuff to it. They would modify it, put on carbon fiber jockey wheels, you know, drill weight relieving holes out of everything that was non-critical, and yeah, I mean, they would do insane mods. Instead of using traditional metal housing for the brake cable or for the derailleur cables, they would use like high strength clear plastic hydraulic hose. Yeah, but beautiful, just elegance itself. I don't think I've ever seen a more beautiful derailleur. Just kidding. I have seen a more beautiful derailleur. Suntour, at a certain point, was very cocksure, very, very full of themselves, and decided to completely revamp derailleurs. So, for a time, you had Suntour doing stuff like this. You know, it's not that weird. It's a slant parallelogram derailleur. Cable goes in here, clamps here. So, yeah, it's pretty, but, you know, nothing particularly fancy. Enter the Suntour Superb Tech derailleurs. Thought of by some as the most beautiful derailleurs ever made. These were a bold statement about the future of Suntour. You might notice this pattern a lot. Companies get sort of cocky and then they reinvent the wheel. And usually, more often than not, that reinvention of the wheel is a total goddamn failure. So I don't think I'm going to crack this open. There's like about 1 billion tiny pieces that make this thing function. But the first thing that you will note is, where does the cable clamp? You know, normally on traditional slant parallelogram derailleur, you see the cable clamps right here where my thumb is. On this, cable actually clamps completely in the opposite direction of traditional derailleurs. So what the deal is that this mounts to your frame, and you have a small stop which receives the housing, which is coming on the chainstay this way. The housing will then go straight over this little runner and get clamped over there. So it's a straight line. You know, on most bikes nowadays, with the exception of a lot of mountain bike derailleurs, you have a big loop. You have a cable housing stop and a big loop of housing that comes around from behind. This is a straight shot. Now there are ways to make pretty much any derailleur like this. Well, not the beautiful part of it, but just a straight bolt clamping derailleur system. There's a company called M5. I think they're German. They make really high-end carbon fiber recumbents and shit like that. You know, shit no one cares about. And they have a kit which you bolt a clamp to where the housing stop is, and you bolt a housing stop to where the clamp is. And so you could run like a Shimano 105. The reason these even exist is that rather than have a traditional layout, they sort of have this carbon fiber mono chainstay that is the only place where the cable can go, and it all works a lot better if it just runs straight into there and is clamped here. So these were kind of a bummer. They're really hard to work on. This thing weighs, I would say it would take 2 of these normal Suntour Superb derailleurs to equal the one Superb Tech. Now this is the one with the extended range. This would be like a mountain bike version of it or a touring version. But it's just gorgeous. That sort of monolithic parallelogram, you know, everything is just sort of packaged really nicely and sealed up in here. You know, really good mud protection qualities on this thing. I love Suntour derailleurs where you can install or take off the chain without having to take off the cage or take off pulley wheels. You know, on one of these, you've got to either break the chain and thread the chain through the pulley wheels, or you have to remove one of the pulleys, thread the chain through. It can, you know, you don't have to break the chain then, and then push up and reinstall the pulley wheel. On these, because they have an abbreviated cage, you can see here that there's no cage from there to there. You can just sort of take the chain, put it up over there, scooch through there, and go back up. This is problematic, though. It was hard to source these proprietary jockey wheels, and they're still made of nylon, so they wear out. Wait a minute. Can you even service? Can you even? I'm not sure if you can even. It's not a rivet. It's just the sort of blind end of that nut. Anyway, that's a pretty fucking cool derailleur. What other weird ones do I have? Someone creeping behind me. I can hear him. Yeah, thank you. You too. Dura Ace AX. Another weird one. This is, I believe this entire group, and we talked about the cranks and pedals last time, but I believe this entire group was an attempt to make the most aerodynamic components possible. I've seen plastic caps that go on the top nut of the headset to make it more rounded, more melted. You know, you keep in mind that this is from an era when they didn't actually really know that much about aerodynamics. You know, a lot of this stuff wasn't wind tunnel tested. They were just sort of, it's, you know what it's a lot like? It's a lot like in the 50s. You know, you have those 50s classic cars where they have these space age design, and you'll see that they have like big fins and crazy, you know, lights and doodads. That's not what the future looked like, and this is not what aerodynamics looks like. This is the same era where you see a lot of funny bikes, bikes that have front wheels that are smaller than the rear wheel, lots of like micro-sized aero tubing, you know, just stuff that's like, you know, fake it till you make it. Like, it looks faster, I guess, but this is really, really neat as well. You know, you sort of have, you have your cage mounting point higher than the body of the parallelogram. For instance, compare it to this. This is actually really interesting too. So, okay, we'll start here. Modern derailleur. Mounting bolt, parallelogram, and the mounting point for the cage is at the bottom of that, so you get a nice little S. The Suntour Superb is sort of mounted in the middle of the cage, you can see. This rocks up and down around it. The Dura Ace, god damn, is it DX or AX? I always forget. I'm just a wealth of knowledge, aren't I? Its pivot point, where the cage is mounted, is actually substantially above where the parallelogram is. It's at the same level as the mounting bolt. This nice little cable guide tail is very neat as well. Wait a minute. So we have cable, clamp, housing, I'll have to look up a schematic on how this goes. Could it really be bare cable guide through this hole, which is big enough for housing? So I doubt it. Then what? Through here, and then clamp to here? I don't know about that. Seems more likely, knowing these weirdos, that it's probably... Well, I don't know. I'll have to look it up. That's a detail that I've never ever noticed about this derailleur. Also, just gorgeous. In the same vein, sort of, with this large seashell-shaped protrusion on this fucking thing, I feel like this is, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but what, Croche d'Aoun, or whatever? There are two versions of this that I've seen, and this is the one that has this swinging bar. So, first of all, I'll point out, this thing is cool. Do you see that crossbar there? And how there's a screw facing it at the top and facing it on the bottom? Those are your limit screws. So if you screw this in, it can go no further than that in the, that would be high. This is the low limit screw, so it's limiting how far in it can travel. Whoop, it stops there. Looks like integrated into that is another... Why would they make it that big? That's got to be for housing. And it clamps there. What's more, the spring tension for the whole thing, spring tension for the inside is there's no spring in the guts, which means that, is it this? Oh yeah. I gotta know. Okay, so I think that the spring is a coil spring that's inside of the cylinder. This cylinder is applying sprung tension to this bar, which is acting as a mounting point, a angle adjustment screw, the cable clamp, the derailleur limit screws, as well as guiding and springing the entire parallelogram. You can see here that the spring tension from this bar, from this whole damn assembly, is imparting the return tension to the entire parallelogram via that rod. God, what a freak show. Also, this doesn't have... Oh, it's got to be broken. Yeah, this should have spring tension, but it doesn't. How far we've come with derailleurs. Now we have DI2, we've got electronic shifting. Rotor Q, which is a Spanish company, just I think a couple years ago, came out with fully hydraulic shifting. I've yet to play with any of the fully hydraulic shifting, but I like the design. I think it's really smart what they've done. But who knows? I mean, I generally hate working on anything with oil in it. I hate forks, shocks, hydraulic brakes, so I'm sure I would hate shifting just as much. This is my favorite derailleur. A Shimano Saint 9-speed derailleur. It is insane. It'll handle huge gears, but only a 1x. This B-link is a ridiculous... I don't even know. What is that, 15 millimeters wide? I usually run them with red aluminum jockey wheels just because it really completes the look. Yeah, the derailleur, it's such a simple little part, and you know, we've gotten to the point where we now have derailleurs that look like I don't know. I was gonna say robot dicks, but you know, dicks don't really look like this, and robots don't fuck. They look like weapons from Halo or something. If you call me out and say that no, they don't, that's probably a fair point. I've never ever played Halo. Anyway, those are some pretty fucked up derailleur designs, and there are some front ones that are just as weird and correspond. But I was sort of rearranging the derailleur section of the museum case and thought, you know what? I'll do a video on goddamned bullshit known as derailleurs. I want to give a shout out to Disraeli Gears. I don't know the guy, but it's a wonderful website and the most amazing resource I've ever found for strange, rare, bad, cheap, or really beautiful derailleurs. He's obsessed with derailleurs. Thanks a lot. Have a good night.